Good afternoon, students. Welcome to this class. And last time we were talking about the human development, the prenatal stage. And today we will focus on the infancy, right? I'm your teacher, G. Angela David. Yes. And so what is the objective of today's session? The objective of today's session is to identify the physical development that occurs during infancy, explain the motor development that takes place during infancy, describe the cognitive development that infants accomplish during this period, and examine the language development seen in infancy, aware of the social and emotional development that infants achieve. Okay, so development, as we spoke before also, proceeds by stages. As the infant grows, he or she moves from one stage to another in a sequential manner. The word infant is derived from the Latin word, infant meaning unable to speak. Thus, many define infancy as the period from birth to approximately 2 years, when language begins to flourish. Infancy is an exciting period of many firsts. There is a first smile, there's a first successful grasp, right? First evidence of separation of anxiety. And first word, the first step, and the first sentence that is spoken by the child. The infant is a dynamic and ever-changing being who undergoes an orderly and a predictable sequence of neurodevelopmental changes as well as the physical growth. Okay, so the period of infancy plays a major role in the latter development. During this, the period of the baby explores the world through sensory and motor skills. During the first 2 weeks after the birth, the infant tries to adjust to the new environment outside the mother's home. Okay, so what are the characteristics, right? What are the characteristics of the infancy? During this period of infancy, the infant makes a lot of adjustment in the new environment. Infancy is a time of radical adjustment. Although human lifespan legally begins at the moment of birth, the important characteristics of the infancy are, right? It's a plateau of development. During this period of prenatal development, there is a rapid growth and development. This growth suddenly comes to a stop with the birth due to the necessity for making radical adjustment to the postnatal environment. Once these adjustments have been made, infants resume their growth and development. Infancy is a preview of later development. Infancy is a period of future prediction. We can start some future prediction about the infant. Some activities show the prediction of the development. Infancy is a hazardous period. Physically, it is hazardous because the difficulties of making necessary radical adjustment to a totally new and different environment, right? And psychologically, infancy is hazardous because it is the time when the attitudes of significant people towards the infant are crystallized and changed radically. After the infant is born, or people towards the infant are born or can remain unchanged depending on the conditions at birth and how the parents adjust. Okay, so now let us talk about the physical development, right? Let us now talk about the physical development. At birth, the proportions of the baby's body are very different from those of the adult. The infant's head is large, while the other parts of the body are smaller in comparison. During the first 2 weeks of the birth, there is a rapid growth in the infant. Thereafter, after first 2 years of their life. By the age of 5 months, the average infant's birth weight is doubled around 15 pounds. By the age of 1 year, the baby weight is tripled to 22 pounds. And also she grows by almost a foot or about 30 inches tall. By the end of second year, the average baby weight is 4 times as much as that at birth, and the height would be almost 3 feet. Sensory and perceptual development. Okay, so along with the physical development also happens the sensory and perceptual development. Sensation is what is sensation? It is an experience of the stimulus acting upon the sensory receptors in the body, while the perception is a process of interpreting the sensation. So much research has been carried out to understand infant perception. Visual, visual acuity, which is the clarity of vision, improves during baby's first year. The infant's color receptors functions much like an adult, even at 2 months of age or around 3 months. Infants are capable of perceiving with size, shape, constancy. In 2016, Gibson and Waugh experimentally demonstrated that even at just 6 months, infants can perceive depth and hence they avoid heights. Within the womb, the fetus is found capable of hearing weeks before delivery. After the birth, they can hear sounds, although their sensory threshold is higher than that of adults. Within a few days of birth, infants begin recognizing the mother's voice. They develop a relationship with their parents. Newborn babies have shown to be able to determine between sweet and sour taste. Like when you put something in the mouth, we can see the reaction on the face. Have been observed within 2 hours of birth. Some babies respond to sound almost immediately after birth. Neonates not only show the ability to respond to sound, but they can also discriminate among certain sounds. Even 3 days old neonates show marked preference for the mother's voice over the voice of others. Vision develops more slowly than many of the senses. Responses to light and darkness are functional. Within 2 days of the birth and by the time they are 10 days old, infants can follow moving objects with their eyes. Neonates can focus their eyes to a distance of 8 to 10 inches. By 6 months of age, infants can determine between colors, between shapes, circles, triangles, and between the faces of parents and strangers. Some infants at young as 1 month old can distinguish between familiar and unfamiliar faces, right? If you look at a baby, a newborn baby, no, a baby born in your own family or in the extended family, you watch how the baby observes, how the baby changes, how the baby's eye movements are there, the expressions on the baby, the way baby starts smiling, the way baby starts, looking at the objects as you keep moving, like the way baby reacts on the face when you put something sweet. Now maybe you put honey in the mouth and you see it enjoys the taste, and then you put something, so these are all the things that is related to sensory perception in the developmental stage. Okay. So the depth perception. The perception process which starts with the birth of a child is one of the most important elements that prepare the child for life. Infancy period is the most critical period in process. Perception here can be defined as the organization and interpretation of stimulus patterns in the environment. This is what, according to Pahin and Arrow. Perception can be defined as an organization and interpretation of stimulus response in the environment. The depth perception is the ability to see the world in 3 dimensions, and some of the object closer while some others further. Though it has been highlighted that infants have the sensitivity towards a 3-dimensional space from the birth, and the depth perception starts to develop immediately after birth, right? There is no research finding that supports the newborn can perceive depth. Newborns' eyes do not work together in the way that the eyes of older children and adults do. The eyes of the newborns move in the same direction only half the time. Okay, so the ability to perceive depth improves with age. Like with eye coordination develops with more cues to depth and distance become available to the infant. By 3 to 5 months age, babies can coordinate their 2 eyes and they begin to see depth as adults do using stereoscope vision, right? Now, what is the stereoscopic vision? Stereoscopic vision is the sense of the third spatial dimension, depth, produced by a combination of images perceived by both the left and the right eye, each of which reflects the image from a slightly different angle. The brain fusion of these two images creates the perception of depth. Proper use of two eyes together at early age is necessary for normal stereoscopic vision to develop. The ability to perceive depth has much practical value. For example, it helps us keep us safe from preventing from walking off cliffs and other high off places. In fact, the example suggests depth perception is critical to survival. Thus, researchers have wondered if this knowledge is innate or built up from experience in some way. To investigate the issue, Gibbs and Walk developed an apparatus called the visual cliff. What is a visual cliff? It consists of an elevated glass platform with a pattern of some type directly beneath the glass on one side, the shallow side, and the same pattern several feet below the glass on the other side, that is the deeper side. Gibson and Walk found that babies from 6 to 14 months old could not cross the shallow to the deep side to get their mothers, to even get to their mothers, even when the mothers encouraged the children to do so. The babies of this age were fearful enough of height to avoid them. Motor development. Now, what is motor development? This takes place during infancy. Motor development is a process through which the baby acquires movement patterns and skills. In the first year of life, the infant acquires ability to direct their eyes at targets, supports their bodies against gravity, grasp and manipulate objects, and move across the room. By 6 weeks of age, infants can hold their head upright. By 2 months of the baby can roll from back onto the side. By 3 months of age, the infant can grasp an object. By 7 months, infant can sit and begins to crawl. And by about 1 year of the age, the baby can walk independently. You see, there is a pictorial representation that is given to you on page number 61. Very beautifully, from the 0 month to each month, how the baby is developing in month 1, the month 2, the month 3, right? Month 4 and month 5, how the baby is turning and how the baby is learning to sit by the age of 6 to 7 months and how it crawls and how it learns to stand. Okay, so when you look at the pictorial depiction, and also if you observe a small baby in your own home or in a joint family system or in your neighborhood, you see how the developmental happens in a infancy, during the infancy. The pictorial chart delineates the development of infants in a sequential order. Note that the age shown are average and it is normal for the milestones to vary by month or two in either direction. Okay. So whatever is shown, it is going in an orderly pattern, in a sequence manner. But there could be some minor differences, like maybe some children may skip a milestone, or some children may have delayed of reaching a milestone. Okay, so these little differences will be there. At 2 months, infants are able to lift their head up on their own. At 3, they can roll. He or she can sit propped up without falling off. By 4 months, 6 months are able to sit up without support, and they begin to stand up while holding on to things from the support in the 7th month. Around 8, the infant begins to walk, however, still using support. At 10 months, he or she is able to momentarily stand up without support. The infant can stand alone with more confidence by 11 months. By 12 months to 1 year, he or she begins walking alone without support. They can start walking backwards without support at 14 months when approaching. The 17th month, the infant can walk steps with little or no support. By 18 months, that is 1.5 years, the infant is able to manipulate objects with the feet while walking, such as kicking the ball. Motor skills are linked with developmental changes in perception and cognition. The acquisition of new motor skills provides infants with new source of information about the world. For example, The development of the hand-eye control provides infants with opportunities to learn about events and the location of the objects and the surfaces. The development of independent locomotion allows infants to learn about places, objects, and surfaces that occurs in the various locations. Okay, so here we come up to we finish the motor development and we move on to the cognitive development. Now, what is cognitive development? And how does cognitive progresses during infancy? Right. So in the similar way as the developmental, as the motor development happens, the cognitive development also, 1 month the baby uses reflexes, adaptive reflexes behavior to different environmental conditions to be able to recognize and learn basic associations, right? I am on page number 62 for those of you who want to know where I am taking this information from. Yeah. And then and at the age of 2 months, the infant is able to anticipate. It's able to stop crying at the sight of feeding bottle, shows interest, animates behavior from human, exhibits organized and selective looking, right? Yes, any problem? Students, any problem? Okay. So 3 months reacts to new objects, making mutual eye contact, enjoys face-to-face play, looks longer at the object attention and in a more investigative type. During the 4 months, baby repeats actions that are pleasurable and satisfying, reaches out, probes objects and reacts differently to some unusual objects. By 5th month, the infant visually follows moving object and focuses attention for a longer time on objects as well as people. By 6th month, the baby learns behavior of known persons, reacts to changes in familiar events. 6 months infants have ability to perceive depth and thus avoid situations in which they might fall. In 7 months, the infant explores objects by manipulation, drops objects from their height, understands the motion of physical support, and focuses more on attention while playing. During the 8th month, the baby displays basic problem-solving abilities, attempts to play, and puts everything in the mouth as a way of exploring. In the 9th month, the infant begins to remember without cues, solves problem, is aware of cause and effect relationships, understand that the outcomes are due to own actions, perceives distance, objects, and begins to show goal-oriented attention. By the time the baby is 10 months, it investigates different toys, right? It repeats play sequences and finds out the hidden objects, right? It is very common to see children playing with the objects at this stage, right? You give the toddler something to hold on that makes noise, they try it, and then they try to play with that. By 11 months, the infant accomplishes goals using different toys and is more easily entertained. By the time the baby is 1 year and plans to achieve a goal, comprehends object and uses imitative learning, recognize self in the mirror and follow other glances. So now you see the infant is able to look at herself or himself in the mirror, smile, make faces, and recognizes it is she or him. By the time the child is baby is 15 months, it uses trial and errors learning, understand functional quality of objects, like uses dolls in plays, show clear evidence of social referencing. 18 months, the baby experiments with objects, recalls better, and uses language to direct attention. By 21 months, the infant to some degree understands past, present, and future and comprehends similar categorizations. By the time the baby is 2 years old, it thinks symbolically and uses language to direct attention and regulate behavior, reproduces behavior after observation, plans to solve problems, engage in fantasy play, and recognize different role of the family members. Cognitive development by Jean Piaget. Okay, Jean Piaget hypothesized that infants are born with schemas operating at birth that he called reflexes. The infant uses these reflexes to adapt to the environment. These reflexes are quickly replaced with construed schema. According to Piaget, the sensory motor stage of development begins at birth and continues till the age of 2 years. Therefore, our focus will be on the sensory motor stage development. Following are the sub-stages of sensory motor stage, the motor development. Simple reflex. This is the first month of life. And during this time, various inborn reflexes are all at the center of baby's physical and cognitive life, determining the nature of his or her interactions with the world. At the same time, some of the reflexes begin to accommodate the infant experience with the nature of the world. Consider the example of grasp reflex. When an infant's palm is stroked and some object is placed in the hand, he or she or immediately will grasp. You see, you try to place something in the child's hand and the child suddenly tries to grasp, stroking the finger, okay? The grasp reflex helps the baby to hold two things, such as the milk bottle. The grasp may be consistent and the baby could drop the object too, right? Then the primary circular reaction, that is from the 1 to 4 months. In this period, the infant begins to coordinate separate actions into single integrated activities. For instance, an infant may combine grasping an object and sucking it. Like it may grasp the milk bottle and also starts sucking it, right? The baby repeats an interesting activity over and over for the sake of continually experiencing. This repetition of chance motum event helps the baby to start building cognitive schemas through a process called circular reactions. Primary circular reactions are schemas reflecting an infant's repetition of interesting or enjoyable actions for the mere pleasure of doing them, which focus on infant's own body. For example, due to a chance event, an infant first puts the thumb or a toe in the mouth. You see how the babies, when they are playing, they lift their thumb or the toe and try to put it in the mouth and begins to suck. And the same repeatedly in the future becomes a sensation of sucking that is becoming very pleasurable for the baby. Secondary circular motion, that is between the age of 4 to 8 months. During this period, the infant begins to act upon the outside world. They now seek to repeat, enjoy events. For instance, the circular reactions and the secondary circular reaction is that the former, the infant's activity is focused on his or her body, while the latter, that is the secondary circular, involves actions relating to the world outside. Fourth, coordination of secondary circular reactions. This happens from 8 months to 12 months. In this stage, infant begins to employ goal-directed behavior, in which several schemas are combined and coordinated to generate a single act to solve a problem. For instance, they will push one toy out of the other to reach to another. Then we move on to the tertiary circular reaction, that is 12 months to 18 months. Infant begins to repeat actions and to vary them deliberately, exploratory manner. For example, infants drop things from different positions to get different sounds. Invention of new instrumental combination, that is 18 months old to 2 years. The major achievement of this stage is the capacity for mental representation or symbolic thought. A mental representation is an internal image of the past or an object. Piaget argued that by this stage, the infant can imagine where objects that they can see might be. The infant demonstrates deferred imitation, copying the past behavior of models, using the skill of deferred imitation. Infants are engaged to pretend play, where they act out imaginary activity. For example, feeding the doll or teaching the student. You will find this is a very common sight where you find the small children playing as, imitating the teachers, holding the stick in the hand, or imitating some elder or playing like doctors, and making their other siblings play like patients or students, all this, okay? So this happens, right? In this stage, that is the invention of the new mental combination, right? So this is what Jean Piaget, cognitive development of infant, he talks about this 6 different kind of sensory motor development. So when you look at here, page number 64, you see the questions are given. Explain the primary circular reaction, substage according to Piaget. You can write all these aspects, like the 6 sensory motor stage in the development of an infant. And that is on page number 64. Then there is another question. What is the difference between the primary and the circular and the secondary circular reaction? You go to the page number 64, 2 and 3. Talks about all this, the primary circular reaction and the secondary circular reaction. So my dear students, I end this sensory perceptions. Okay, and please go through in detail, right? All this motor development. So far, whatever we have done in this unit number 5, the characteristics of infancy, right? And we here complete the infancy stage of the child. And we move to the language development. Now, what is the language development? We have seen earlier that the root of the term infancy means unable to speak. However, foundation of the language development begins in infancy, such as the sounds, are a means in which the infants communicate both onward, and the aim of producing this sound is to draw attention. So we now learn about the milestone that is common to infants' word, irrespective of the language they are exposed to. So you see, there are different ways in which a child expresses himself in the language development. Okay, the first one is the crying. It is the first typical sound produced at birth. Different type of cries indicate different meanings. For example, the child can cry if it's hungry. The child can cry if it's tired, right? So it is a basic. And the infant produces rhythmic pattern of crying with a brief intermittent silence. There is also an anger cry, where the baby forces out the air through the vocal cords. The pain cries sudden, loud moaning and holding breath. Okay, so this when the child doesn't get what it wants and it's very angry, then the child gives a loud cry and it holds the breath and cries. And, so this is the way the child expresses herself or himself. Then cooing. Around 1 to 2 months, the babies begin to coo, which is a form of gurgling sound produced at the back of the throat, either in imitation or in response of the person interacting with the person. So you see, you move to the small little babies, and you start cooing with them, and you say, because they're not still, the language is still not developed. So you use sounds and you start, cooing them, you start tickling them, then they start making these kind of noises. Babbling. By the middle of the first year, the infant starts babbling by producing sounds like repeated consonant and vowel syllables like mama or baba. They start slowly bringing these words, and start babbling, right? They start using the first words like, either they can begin even papa, like mama or baba, those kind of. Then gestures. Gestures, namely pointing out and shows deference to in around 8 to 12 months of age. Other examples of infants waving their hands, you see these infants are able to use gestures in the form of saying bye, in the form of saying hi, in the form of saying, giving a high five. All these are gestures that the infants use. And how they begin to smile with others, and how they begin to laugh, and how they communicate with and build their bonds with others. The first word are utterly uttered around the age of 13. And by 1.5 years, the infants start building their vocabulary. Now, according to the nativist position, the acquisition of knowledge is primarily a matter of maturation. The most famous advocate of this point is Noam Chomsky, a linguist of Massachusetts Institute of Technology, regarded language as a biologically based, unique human accomplishment. Chomsky believed that the humans are born with pre-wired structures called the language acquisition device. It is also called as the LAD, a biologically based innate system that enables a child to process the language heard, that is the linguistic input, to construct rules and to understand and to generate appropriate grammatical speech. This device is not actually an organ, but merely a hypothetical mechanism and must be universally applicable and be able to handle language. So you have this linguistic data. Now, according to Chomsky, LAD, that is the language acquisition device, is a universal grammar, built storehouse of rules to all human languages. Young children use this knowledge to combine words into grammatically consistent utterance to understand the meaning of sentences they hear. The various languages have common underlying set of rules. Furthermore, LAD is specifically suited for languages processing. Sophisticated cognitive capacities are required to master the structure of language. Instead, children do so spontaneously with only limited exposure. Right. So there is a sharp contrast to the behavioristic view. The nativist perspective regards deliberate training by parents as unnecessary for language training. Instead of LAD, that is a language acquisition device, ensures that the language will be acquired early and swiftly despite its inherent complexities. To support this view, Chomsky points out the fact that children all over the world goes into similar stages of language development and at the same age and in the pattern that parallels that of motor development. He cites also the fact babbling is the same in all cultures, and the deaf children also babble just like the normal children. Thus, universality and regularity in sound production suggest that early linguistic development depends primarily on maturation and changes in the brain. Research suggests that the children have remarkably ability to invent new language systems in which support the nativist perspective. The evidence of the limited ability of apes on language acquisition, the localization of the function in the brain, and of the sensitive period of language development are all consistent with the Chomsky's view. The human beings are prepared of a language in a specialized way. Let us move towards the social development. Right. What is social development? At all ages, a baby's psychological functions derives the meaning from social context in which the baby is raised. The nature, content, and the rate of development are all closely related to the kind of interpersonal experiences that the infant encounters within the social environment he or she grows in. The social development of the infant is expressed in several ways. Sensory processing is influenced by the infant's social needs. The infant has great discrimination ability for social voices than for non-social stimuli. Interaction with peers shape infants' behavior at an early age. They smile, laugh, and vocalize while looking at their own peers, whom they are familiar over unknown peers. With the age, infants' level of sociability rises. In the first 6 months of life, they touch and look at each other and responsive to each other's behavior. If one baby cries, immediately the others start crying. Between 6 and 12, infant influences other children by vocalizing, by looking at, or by waving at the babies. Babies aged 9 to 12 months mutually present and accept toys if they know each other. At the age of 14 months, they engage in social games and imitating each other. Milestones in infants' social development. 0 to 6 months touches and looks at other infant and cries in response to the other person's cry. You see that this is a common thing that can be observed. Then it tries to influence another baby by vocalizing, that is 6 to 12 months, by looking at or waving at the baby, interacts with the other infants, which is generally friendly and may sometimes hit or even push. 13 to 24 months, it begins to adapt complementary behavior like taking turns, engaging more social play throughout the period, begins to engage in imaginatory play. In this manner, the infant builds strong love and friendship relationship with family members and a few significant others. One must remember that the developments in the different domains do not exist in isolation. With physical, sensory, perceptual, motor, cognitive, language, and social development, we have been seen in this lesson, the baby proceeds from the stage of infancy to the next stage of development called the babyhood. Right? Now, my dear students, you see there are summary here. I am on page number 67. You can check your progress through the model answers. And here on page number 68, there is a model examination questions. Somebody asked me, can you please send me some model examination questions? I would recommend that you please study what is there already in your textbook. On page 68, you find the model questions given here. What do you mean by deferred imitation? Explain physical development of the child in 2 years. Explain sensory motor stage of Piaget. It's all given on different page numbers, 63, 65. Okay, and then they're even testing how much you have read through multiple choice, fill in the blanks and match the following. And then you also have a glossary, right, very clearly, which explains to you about the different meanings in case you find difficulty in the exam. So here I complete the stage of infancy of Unit 5. Okay, students, we move to the next unit. The next unit is Unit 6. And what is this Unit 6 about? It is all about childhood. What are the objectives of studying this unit? The objective is to identify physical development that occur during childhood, explain different characteristic patterns of behavior in each development stage of childhood, discuss the emotional developments that takes place during childhood, describe the moral developments that the child accomplished during this period, and become aware of social and personality development the children achieve. So these are the basic objectives of childhood. Okay. So childhood is a time, I'm on page number 70. Childhood is a time for children to be in school and to play, to grow strong and become confident with love, encouragement of the family and extended community of caring adults. Childhood is an age span ranging from birth to adolescence. In developmental psychology, childhood is divided up to developmental stages of toddlerhood, that is learning to walk, early childhood, that is the play age, middle childhood, that is the school going age, and the late childhood, that is the adolescent, that is the puberty and the post puberty. So let us move to the characteristics of the early and late childhood. Early childhood extends from 2 years to 7 years, from 2 years up to 6 to 7 years. Growth is not as rapid as it was during infancy. It is still faster than any other later periods of development. During the first half of the stage of this, the child is busy picking up skills to communicate, learns the motor skills of walking and running. By 3 years of age, the child uses all forms of adult language and taking interest in the outside world, but understand only in terms of concrete perceptual experience. The child becomes imaginative. Imagination develops as the child starts to interact with the outside world and explores, experiments, and asks questions. Through these activities, he understands the world around him. Concrete experiences are very important as he develops his or her concepts through them. Middle to late childhood. Now, middle to late childhood extends from 6 years until the child becomes sexually mature. We can also say puberty. The stage is labeled by parent as a troublesome or quarrelsome age, by educators as elementary school age, by the psychologists as the gang age, the age of conformity. Because they are in the school, they influence one another, or the age of creativity. A child at this age moves around in groups, which consists of others of the same sex. Gang loyalty and prejudice game is something that makes a child at this stage most miserable. Thinking is more flexible and relates to objects to each other and classifies them according to the different criteria and use symbols but not abstract thinking. Okay, so this is what happens from the age of 6 to till the child is sexually mature. Developmental tasks. Society plays an important role in overall development of the individuals. Each society has its own demand and expectation from children at different stages of development. The codes and expectations vary from culture to culture. With the child learns at different stages of development, the social expectations are known as the developmental tasks, and the society wants to transmit its expectations to all its members. Some tasks are like the same for everyone, regardless of where we live due to human biology. Example, crawling and walking are the same in all societies. Some tasks are different in different. Example, the task of enrolling names in the schools in different cultures. The idea of developmental tasks is generally credited to the work of Robert Havigas. Havigas defines developmental task as a task which arises of certain period in life of an individual, successful achievement of which leads to happiness and success with later tasks. while failure leads to unhappiness of the individual, disapproval by the society, and difficulty with the later task. Now, 6 major stages in human life identified by Havigas are infancy and early childhood, that is the birth till 6. Middle childhood, that is from 6 to 12. Adolescence is from 13 years to 18. Early adulthood, 19 to 30. And later maturity, middle age, 30 to 60 years. And later maturity, 60 and over. Havigas has given the following list of developmental tasks occurring in each stage of human development. For this chapter, our focus will only be on the first 3 stages. That is ages of 0 to 6, ages from 6 to 12, and ages from 12 to 18. Let's take each one of them, right? What happens in the ages of 0 to 6 according to Havigas? The child learns to walk, it learns to crawl, it learns to take solid food, it learns to talk, learning to control the elimination of the body waste like toilet training, okay, learning sex differences and sexual modesty, and getting ready to read. The next, okay, is from the ages of 6 to 12. Learning physical skills necessary for ordinary games. Learning to get along with other age mates. This happens in the age group of 6 to 12. Building wholesome attitude towards oneself as a growing organism. Learning about appropriate masculine or feminine social roles, right? Like the girls will start behaving like girls and the boys like the boys, right? And as per the expectation of the society. Develop the concept necessary for everyday living. Developing concept necessary for everyday living. Developing conscious morality and the scale of values. Achieving personal independence. So developing the attitude towards the social group and institutions. Next, we go to the age from 12 to 18. Now, what happens during this age? At the age of 12 to 18, the children achieve new and more mature relations with age mates of both the sexes, achieving a masculine or feminine social role, accepting one's physics and using the body effectively, achieving emotional independence from the parents and other older adults, preparing for marriage and family life, acquiring a set of values and ethical system as a guide on to behavior, desiring and achieving socially responsible behavior. So here ends the stages of human life according to Havigas. Okay, so now you see page number 72. You are having question and answer. What is the development task according to Havigas? You refer to page number 71. You can focus on these 3 different developmentals that takes place at 3 different stages, that is 0 to 6, 6 to 12, and 12 to 18. You can write that. Okay. And then there is also another one. What is the importance of developmental task? Which is again very clearly given in page number 71. We move on to physical development of childhood. Okay. The course of physical growth in a human being is long drawn process in comparison to other species. According to the evolutionary theorists, the lengthy period of the physical immaturity, in fact, provides us with added time to acquire skill and knowledge, which are required in a complex social world. Physical development provides children with abilities they need to explore and interact with the world around them. Physical development encompasses different tasks and abilities. Physical growth illustrates many of the principles of development. Now, principles of physical growth. There are 4 basic principles of physical and motor development. They are called the cephalocaudal and proximodistal hierarchical integration and independence. Okay. Now, what are these? Right? This principle, the cephalocaudal principle, refers to the fact that development proceeds from the head to downwards. That is, the child gains controls of the head first, and then the arms, and then the legs. Infants develop control of the head and face movement. First 2 moments after the birth, they are able to lift themselves up by using their arms in the next few months. Infants start to gain leg control and may be able to crawl, stand, walk in this age. The coordination of arms always precedes the coordination of leg. So this principle of growth, it begins from the head to the downwards. The next is the proximodistal. The proximodistal development indicates that the development proceeds from the center of the body outwards. It describes the direction of development. The spinal cord develops before outer parts of the body. The child's arms develops before the hand. Hands and feet develop before fingers and toes. Finger and toe muscles used in fine motor dexterity are the last to develop in the physical development. The principle for hierarchical integration states that the simple skills develop separately and later the simple skills integrate into more complex ones. For example, grasping the objects in one hand and mastered. Once a child learns how to control and integrate the movements of the fingers. The principles of independent systems shows that the different body systems grow at different rates. This implies that the growth in one system does not depend on the growth of the other system. For example, the growth of the body size, the nervous system, the sexual characteristics are all independent of each other. Okay, so this is what is all about the principles of growth and development. The physical growth does not grow as a whole in all directions at once. The growth changes can be divided into 4 types. What are they? They are the neural, lymphoid, general, and the genital, right? And among these 4 development, neural growth is most rapid. This involves development of the nervous system. The nervous system grows very rapidly before birth during first 3 to 4 years after birth. Nearly 80% of the growth occurs by age 4 after the birth. The brain weight is about 1/8 of the body weight at 10 years, right? And 1/18 of the body weight at 15 years. And 1/30 of the body weight and maturity 1/40 of the body weight. It grows more during the first 2 years of life. The growth of the brain affects all aspects of the child's development. The lymphoid tissues, which plays a role in the body's immune processes, reaches the adult level at the age of 6 and doubles at the age of 12. The skeletal system includes the bone that supports and shapes the body. The growth of the skeletal system is rapid at birth. The development of the viscera, such as the respiratory and vascular organs, happen at the same rate and at the bone and muscle tissue. Genital growth occurs markedly after pubescence. Physical growth can be seen in dimensions of body proportions of height and weight. Change in body proportions. Physical growth follows the cephalocaudal, proximodistal, and hierarchical integration and independence of system principles. At birth, the head and the trunk are disproportionately large and the extremities are disproportionately short. After the first year, the head grows more slowly and its proportion to the total body decreases progressively. The legs grow more rapidly than the trunk during the childhood. Now, changes in height. At birth, the height of the baby is between 17 to 21 inches. The growth rate is rapid during first 2 years. At 4 months, the child measures 23 to 24 inches. At 8 months, 26 to 28 inches. And at 1 year, 28 to 30 inches. At 2 years, the child's height would be ranging between 32 up to 15 years. This gender trend in health is shown in the graph. Okay. Change in the body weight. The average weight of the newborn baby is between 6 to 8 pounds. The trend of the growth curves of the weight parallels that of a height, but the rate is rapid in the case of weight. The child ordinarily doubles his or her birth weight in 6 months or less, but requires 4 years to double his or her height. Certain anatomical changes are seen in child's advances in age. For instance, the teeth begin to form in the jaw from the 3rd prenatal month. During the period, 2 sets of teeth appear, the baby teeth and the permanent teeth. By the age of 9 months, children generally have 2 to 3 teeth. Around 6 years of age, the child 1 or 2 permanent teeth, 10 or 11 teeth at the age of 88 years, 14 to 16 by the age of 10, 24 to 26 teeth by the age of 12, and 27 to 28 teeth by the age of 13. The last 4 teeth appears by 25 years of age. Physiological functions. Physiological function refers to the processes that takes place in the body. These include sleeping patterns, eating, and elimination of waste. Alongside physical development, the child physiological process also matures and are set into patterns. During infancy, there is a shift from daytime sleeping to nighttime sleeping. Further, in childhood, the duration of sleep is dependent on the level and the kind of activity the child engages in. Nonetheless, there is a decrease in half an hour in the average sleep time with the increasing of age. Eating behaviors evolved from the sucking and chewing between infancy and childhood, which help children consume semi-solid and solid food progressively in the place of liquid food. It happens systematically. Interestingly, the sense of taste concurrently develop and child begin to show likes and dislike for different food. As regards the elimination of waste, bowel control is achieved by the end of infancy, while bladder control, particularly during the night time, may take a little longer to learn. Typically, by the time child begins school, bladder control is well established. Factors that influence the child's physical and motor development include heredity, prenatal conditions, socio-economic status, home environment, and nutrition. It can be concluded that physical growth, both on maturation and learning. With maturation, learning plays a major role in the physical and motor development of the children. Okay, so with this, now we have now spoken about the physical development of the children, of what are the principle of physical growth, how physical growth happens, what are the changes that occurs in body proportion, in height, and physiological functions. Okay, and then we move towards the social development. You find here 2 questions. Okay, you can check your process. Okay, explain the basic principles of physical development. You can find it on page 73. And what are the factors that influence physical development? You can check on page 73 and 74. Social development refers to the process by which a child learns to interact with others around them. Changes in the kinds of relationship we build, our ability to establish relationship, the way we interact with others, and the way we think about ourselves are all considered to be part of the social domain. As children become more mature, physical, cognitively, and emotionally, the social relationship with the family and peers also mature and change. In sensory motor development, the baby's main social need and development task is bonding and connecting with primary caregivers. In contrast, young children starting to branch out and to create other social relationships. During middle childhood, peer friendships take on more prominent role than before. Every society has its norm. In the course of development, each individual follows the basic norms of the society and behaves in accordance with it. This process by which people interact with others and behave according to the social norms is called the socialization. And there are various stages in the socialization process, right? And it begins from infancy when the children are 2 months old and they are able to respond by smiling, focus their eyes on their mother, adults who take care of them. And very soon they start recognizing the voice of the mother, they enjoying the presence of others and cry, and if left alone, and they imitate simple adult sounds and take interest in the adult activities. So this is how social development starts. Early childhood. Now, early childhood is from the age of 2 to 6 years. Early childhood marks the beginning of the child's contacts outside the home. By the second year of the child shows shorter social interaction due to increased locomotion as well as developing cognitive and language skills. The client's interaction starts with the use of words to communicate. Social interactions become more complex, more reciprocal, and interactive sequences are sustained over significantly longer periods of time. in earlier days. While preschoolers' relation with adults reflect children's need for protection and direction, their relations with peers are based on more on the desire for companionship, play, and fun. In early childhood, the children relate to others mostly through play. During the second year, there seemed to be an elementary understanding in the rules of social exchange, mainly in the form of games toddlers play. Toddlers wait for their turn in the play and coordinate their play with the partners. It is through play they learn to share, cooperate, and imitate. They imitate others' behavior and also recognize when others imitate their behavior. The emergence to pretend play is seen in the second year. But by third year, children are much more likely to share, to pretend to play. During the third year, the first sign of pro-social behavior like sharing and helping others. The dominant forms of social behaviors are negativism, aggression, quarreling, teasing, bullying, and so on. Children share symbolic meaning with each other, assign imaginary roles, and they pretend to play. In early childhood, the emergence of conflict is seen, and it is more in the case of social toddlers. With the succession of encounters, toddlers develop reciprocal relations. At the end of 5 years, the child develops friendships. During the preschool years, there is an emergence of social dominance hierarchies, which refer to making of an individual in terms of the dominance in their group. More dominant children are the winners of conflict, where less dominant are the losers. However, in early childhood years, children's opportunities for social participation are largely governed by their parents. Children's social environments also determine the form of peer relationships. Okay, so that is all about the early childhood from the age of 2 to 6 years. Now we move on to the middle childhood, middle to late childhood. That is from the age of 6 to 12 years. A 2-year child spends 10% of the time in social interaction with peers, whereas a middle childhood figure rises to 30%. Like childhood is characterized by the beginning of the gang age, children develop new contacts and they have a larger and more diverse group of friends due to formal schooling and different group activities. Friendships come to play an increasingly important role during the middle childhood. Children grow progressively more sensitive to the importance of friends and building and maintaining friends. Friendship becomes a large part of child social life. During the middle and the late childhood, verbal aggression replaces their physical aggression. Now children engage in games and definite rule. Social dominance hierarchies tend to become more stable in the middle childhood. Okay, so this is the time where the children listen to the friends more than to the family or the parents. They long for the validation of the friends. They would like to bond with their friends. Milestones in children's social development. 2 years. There is an understanding of the rules of the social experiment. First evidence of pro-social behavior is found in children, and the children operate according to a desired psychology. Okay. 3 years, children begin to engage in cooperative play and operating according to the belief, desires, and the dominance hierarchies are observed in the children's peer group. When they are 4 years, it is commonly observed they associate play with the conflicts and observed in relationship. By the time they are 6 years, they spend more time with peers and peer group increases in size and peer interactions takes place, a wider range of settings, and they are less under the control of adults. The goal of friendships is typically defined by shared interests and the maintenance of coordination and play. By the time they're 7 to 9 years, the friendship is all about gaining peer acceptance. By the time they reach 9 to 12 years, friendships are centered on intimacy and self-disclosure. Peer groups become organized around the cliques and the crowd. Okay, so this is all about the social development of the infancy childhood. Okay, personality development. Personality includes the stable psychological characters that define each human being as unique. Both children and adults have personality traits. That is a long-term characteristic temperament and states changeable characteristics such as moodiness. While variety of explanations are possible, most experts agree whatever causes an individual personality is established by the end of early childhood. A combination of pro-social, parental, and biological influence are likely to be responsible for the ultimate determination of the human traits and states. Family relationships are critical to the physical, mental, and social health of growing preschoolers. Many aspects of the family parenting technique, discipline, the number and the birth order of the sibling, the family's finances and circumstances and the family's health more contribute to the young children's psychosocial development. Preschoolers may learn as much more from their siblings than from their parents. The preschool years are associated with major developments in the young children's socialization. No longer totally dependent on parents, preschoolers begin to long road becomes adept at functioning in their own world. During the early childhood, that is the age of 2 to 6, children gain some sense of being separate and independent from their parents. Okay. So this is all about the personality. As they keep growing up, you can see the characteristics. You can see how the psychological characteristics and the traits and how the changes starts taking place. Okay. And according to the Erik Erikson, primary development task, the task of the middle and the late childhood attain industry and feeling of social competence, competitions in athletic, social adjustment, all these are being developed. When you look at the Erik Erikson, the psychosocial development, he has given us a theory of development that impact the external factors, parents and society and personal development from childhood to adulthood. Erik Erikson believed that people are constantly developing socially from birth throughout their life and successfully master each step necessary before moving on to the next. Successful completion of each stage leads to healthy personality, and failure to complete the stage successfully can lead to inhibition in completion of the other stage and unhealthy personality. He divided the phases of psychosocial development into 8 distinctive stages. The first 4 going from infancy through adolescence. These are the first 4. We are focusing only on the first 4. That is the trust versus mistrust, which happens from the birth to 1 year. That is, the child learn to trust, people and the world by this age, right? If they are provided by a very caring and a loving environment, the child starts believing and beginning to understand that the world place is a safe place to live. It starts trusting, okay? Another one is autonomy versus shame and doubt. Here, the parents and the care should encourage the child celebrating independence, displaying during this phase in order to build child's self-confidence. Securely, children next to face challenges of autonomy or doing things on their own. If the child is appreciated, if the child is, encouraged, then it develops autonomy. It's able to do things independently and a self-confidence level also improves. Initiative versus guilt from 3 years to 5 years. Here it is also a time for exploratory and investigative attitude that results in meeting and accepting challenges. Children who are given the freedom to explore and experiment with adults, answer their question, tend to develop initiatives. Those who are restricted are considered to be problem, tend to develop a sense of guilt about pursuing their interest. And the fourth one he speaks about in this phase is the industry versus the inferiority. That is the age of 6 to 11 years. Through social interaction, children begin to develop a sense of pride in their accomplishment and abilities. Children who are encouraged and commended by parents and teachers, developing a feeling of competence and belief on their skill. If not, then they develop a low self-concept and inferiority complex where they believe that they are not good and others are better than them. Emotional development. Emotions are subjective reaction to the environment usually experienced. Okay. Cognitively as pleasant or unpleasant, generally accompanied by some form of physiological arousal and often communicated to others by some behavior or action. Children's emotional development is influenced by many factors. The genetic inheritance, the conditions of environment in which they are born, their interaction with the family members and the peers, and so on. During the childhood, the children emotionally become more advanced. Their emotion is focused on themselves. The advanced cognitive skill is allowed for more sophisticated responses, and emotions are expressed. Emotions are viewed as important determinants and consequences of interaction with others. These emotions can be caused by observing and recognizing what is happening to others. Responses that occurs because of the exposure to someone else's emotional state are known as the vicarious emotional responding. During early childhood, children tend to act and speak in the ways that focuses on their own needs and desires. They're likely to respond to others' emotional distress in ways that they find themselves comforting. Okay, So as the child develops the capacity to take the perspective of others, they increasingly become aware of other people's feelings. Until later childhood, the children empathetic and sympathetic responses are limited to feelings of the familiar persons or familiar situations. Okay, as cognitive development become more advanced, young children become increasingly aware of their own and others' emotion. As a result, children begin to develop more complex understanding of cause and consequences of the emotion and how it controls the emotion and the nature of emotional responses. We move on to the moral development. Moral development includes the way individual reasoning, morality, the emotion associated with morality, the action behavior demonstrating morality, and the socialization or teaching of morality. It's a level of agreement or a disagreement with the system of moral rules or standards of right and wrong. Jean Piaget and Lawrence Kohlberg offered explanation for the acceptance and the development of moral standards. Okay, so I suggest that you read a little more about, you read this whole thing, yeah, about how this moral development takes place. Yeah. Jean Piaget proposed a theory of involving invariant sequences of stages of moral development, where children progresses as cognitive capacity is becoming increasingly sophisticated. I am on page number 79. Okay, so where the theory of Jean Piaget is explained in this place. Okay, children in this stage simply do not understand the concept of rules and have no idea of morality, internal expert. Belief in the eminent justice and objective responsibility characterized by moral reason. In the stage of morality, of reciprocity, the children recognize intentionality and the arbitrariness of the social rules in the moral judgment. This is what Jean Piaget talks about. We have Lawrence Kohlberg, who particularly well known in the theory of moral development, and he popularized through the research conducted at Harvard and modified and refined Jean Piaget's theory of moral development. According to Kohlberg, a child's cognition capabilities determine the evolution of his or her moral reasoning. Kohlberg's theory of moral development is a continuous process that occurs throughout the lifespan. Achievement of each stage depends on how much the child grasped in the previous stage. He found the person's idea of morality changes as the person matures. Based on the analysis of the interviews of 10 to 16 years old boys who were confronted with a series of moral dilemmas, chooses between acts of obedience to rules and authority or the need and welfare of others while conflicted with regulation. He developed his theory on moral development. A series of moral dilemmas were presented to these participants, and they were also interviewed to determine the reasoning behind the judgment of each scenario. The following is one of the example representation dilemma presented to the young person. Okay, so there is a case of this young woman, who was near death from a very special kind of cancer. And there was one doctor who thought he might save his life in the form of a radium that a druggist sold in the same town as recently discovered. The drug was expensive to make, but the druggist was charging 10 times what the drug cost him to make. He spent $200 for the radium and charged $2,000 for the small dose of drug. The sick woman's husband hence went to everyone he knew to borrow the money, but he could only gather about $1,000, which is half of what is the cost. He told the druggist that his wife was dying and asked him to make money from it. So hence got desperate and broke into the man's store to steal the drug for his wife. Should the husband have done? That is the question Kohlberg was raising. The man must now decide whether or not steal the drug to save his wife, whether to obey the rules and the law of society or violate them to respond to the needs of his wife. What should the man do and why? Right? Okay, so the moral dilemma here is stealing versus saving life. Is it important that to save life, or is it okay to steal in order to save life? The judgment is, should the husband have stolen? And the justification is, why do you think he should have done or he should not have stolen? If Kohlberg based the stage analysis on judgment, there would be two stages. Yes to steal and no to stealing. Yes, because on human grounds, he wanted to save the life of the woman. And no to stealing because it is not correct to steal. So the levels and stages of stealing. On the base, Kohlberg formulated 3 levels in the 6 stages of moral development. The pre-conventional morality, that is the early childhood, that is based on the desire to avoid punishment and gain rewards. I will do what I'm supposed to do in order to avoid punishment. These are the characteristics of the level, and the emphasis is more on the events or the physical needs rather than the people and the standard. And the level 2 is a conventional morality. That is a late childhood. It is based on the child's notion, I will do what I'm supposed to do as things work out better when everyone follows the rule. It identifies with the parents and conforms to what they regard as the right and the wrong. The child has motives to conform and the motions of ethical standard. The level 3 is the post-conventional morality of adolescent onwards. It is characterized as a self-accepted moral principle. I will do for or won't do what I'm supposed to do based, I think or I don't think it is the right thing to do. Moral judgment is rational and internalized, and that conduct is controlled by the ethical code that is relatively independent of others' approval or castigation. Moral conflict is resolved in terms of broad ethical principle, and violating this principle results in guilt and self-condemnation. Okay, so the progression between levels, level 1 people attend to themselves, level 2 people attend to others and what others think about them, and the level 3 people attend to society standards and their relation to them and their own. Now, what are the hazards? The important physical hazards of the early childhood include mortality, illness, accidents, inactiveness, and obesity. Young children are highly susceptible to all kinds of illness, though respiratory illness is common. Most young children experience cuts, infection, burns, broken bones, and similar minor disturbances resulting from accidents. The important psychological hazard of early childhood and unsocial content of speech, failure to learn social adjustment due to lack of guidance, too much emphasis on amusement, and too little on active play, deterioration in family relationships. The major emotional hazard is the dominance of unpleasant emotion, especially the anger. Moral hazard include too much emphasis on punishment for misbehavior and too little emphasis on rewards for good behavior. This leads to unfavorable attitudes towards those in authority. Deterioration in any human relationship is adverse to good personal and social adjustment. Emerging issues in childhood include implementing and evaluating multidisciplinary interventions that addresses overall development of child by fostering knowledge and nurturing families, parents, and caregivers, creating supportive and safe environment in home, school, communities, and increasing access of high quality health care. Okay, so by this we end this chapter 6. Okay, now you see again on page 81, there is a progress. Check your answers. Okay, what are the characters of good boy morality? You look at the conventional morality and you explain. Explain the characters of post-convention and the difference between the moral and morality. Everything is given in your book. You have a summary on the page 82. And then you check your progress where model answers have been given, right? And then there is also, in a very beautiful way, they have summarized everything. Model exam questions are given, and then there is also multiple choice and fill in the blanks. Please go through this whole chapter 6, right? And chapter 5 and chapter 6 is what we complete today, infancy and childhood. Unit 5 is infancy. Unit 6 is childhood. So we completed 5 and 6 chapters. Please go through in the details, the whole, your textbook. You will have a better understanding. Try to understand the subject. You'll be able to write in your own words too, right? Except for the technical words that are there, given in the glossary, and they are also given the meaning of the words. So thank you very much for listening. Have a great weekend. See you tomorrow. Goodbye and God bless you.